Welcome back. You're watching the special edition of the Global Dialogues. We're in conversation with Piyush Gupta of DBS, Prem of Fairfax, and Shobana Kamineni of Apollo Hospitals. Perhaps the only bank that's probably going to move on the privatization front, or at least will lead the privatization front, is IDBI Bank. Piyush Gupta and Prem Watsa, is that of interest? Piyush, I'll start by asking you.
Well, Shereen, at this point, no, because I'm a big believer in being able to, swallow and digest what you have. And so we're currently in the throes of trying to make sure we can handle the 600 new branches we got and the whole infrastructure. And so that's what's occupying our attention right now. But as Prem said, in the goodness of time, we're committed to tripling our franchise in India in the next 5 years. And we will use every opportunity we get to be able to, expand rapidly.
Prem?
Shereen, you'll expect me to not make any comment on that other than to say that we're excited. We're interested in all the opportunities, Shereen. We're looking at everything. And of course, we'll make an announcement after the decision, not before.
Right. Shobana, I want to address a separate issue with you, and that really has to do with how we reimagine public-private partnership as we move forward. We're marking 75 years of our independence. The PPP model has worked in some areas, hasn't worked in others. As we move forward, what is the role of the private sector in collaboration with the government that you see? We've seen that work in healthcare in some pockets, in some instances. Well, how do you reimagine PPP as we move forward?
Shereen, I think that this is a particular, it's each one's experience, which has been, we've had a great experience. In fact, our Delhi hospital is a great shining example of PPP in healthcare. But I think that if you move to the courts, there's so many of them where, the PPP have had to be adjudicated, and for years and years, decisions haven't been taken. Having said that, I think that as president of CII, one of the things that I saw that was developing in this government was actually there was more trust between the private sector and the government and the bureaucracy. And I think that's the crux of it. If we can bring back that trust, because there's no one can actually, bring India to that 5 trillion number just by, the private sector or government. It has to be joint in many, many areas. We need better cities. We need more infrastructure. We do need more jobs more than anything else. And I think diversity. And that will only come when both are playing this together and when the opportunities are there. So while this ease of doing business was a huge focus, I think that now privatization is added to it. I think in the 75th year, we should not forget that it's all of India and all Indians that will make India continue to stay great. So I'm hopeful, but I do think that there's work. It's a work in progress also.
It is a work in progress. And Piyush Gupta, that's what I want to address with you, because I know that you believe that the private sector's capacity is to also shape society in different ways. And I know you have said previously that you believe in doing real things for real people. So as a leader, as you look at what the road ahead looks like, what do you believe businesses and leaders like yourself will need to prioritize, and in areas of possible collaboration with the government?
So Shereen, the heart of this thing is the debate between shareholder capitalism and stakeholder capitalism. So what is the true purpose and role of a corporation? And everybody cites Milton Friedman's famous article, which said the only purpose of a company is to make a profit for shareholders. And obviously, the counterpoint to that is that when you're given life as a legal entity, you inherit some responsibilities to society, to civil society at large, and to people. I'm in the second camp, and frankly, I don't think there's too much conflict between what Friedman said and the stakeholder capitalism view. The question is typically one of timeframes. If you really take the long view and you figure how you're going to be relevant and how you're going to make a return for shareholders over 20, 30, 40 years, then it seems to me you don't have a choice. You've got to be relevant to people, communities, societies, and governments. If you're not, you will not get the license from them to stick around. And therefore, the minute you change your time frame and think long term, the conflict tends to disappear. I think it's instructive that in the last few years around the world, this has obviously become fashionable. This idea of purpose and mission has become fashionable. But I think a lot of global companies and CEOs have actually been able to demonstrate that they're serious about doing things that make a difference. It's not just about squeezing out the next dollar, but being able to be relevant and contribute into societies and communities. So I do think it's beginning to be fashionable. The investor community is looking for, I mean, ESG is the well-known acronym, but everybody's beginning to look at the role that companies play. So I think there's a much better alignment of interest. I think Shobana nailed it. The real question is the question of trust. So when you get to the stage where governments in the public sector are willing to trust the private sector, recognizing that they have an equal role to play and they have an agenda beyond just profit maximization, you start getting some beautiful outcomes. And I often tell people that one model to consider is the Singapore model. Now, we're a small country. We're a city, frankly. We're 5 million people. But the Singapore model, which effectively says Temasek, the sovereign fund, owns 50% of the country, including a 30% stake in our own bank, DBS. But they do not get into the management of any of these companies. They're the shareholder, but they hire professional management, appoint professional boards, and let the private sector get on with the job. Now, the private sector, because of the shareholding construct, is mindful of its role to society at large. It tends to work out quite well. Without the usual interference from politicians and the handicaps the private sector has, it doesn't, handicap the system. But you get a really good blend of bringing the whole country together. Now, the areas where you can do this are immense. And as you go forward, I think ESG captures it well. I think sustainability is going to be big. And there is no way governments alone are going to be able to solve whether it's the climate challenge or the biodiversity challenge. The movers and shakers of capital in the world have got to come to the party. Similarly, the S of ESG, being able to think about inclusion at scale, the social ramifications of the bottom of the pyramid. The main actors in the world are private sector actors. They've got to have a meaningful role to play working alongside the public sector and the government. But today, digital technology, AI gives us all the opportunity to solve the knotty problems of the world. So if governments and private sector come together, you can do a lot of things that weren't possible 15 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. And as you point out, we need all the movers and shakers to come to the party and be at the table. And Prem, in that context, how are you realigning your investment strategy or investment philosophy to cater to some of those issues that Piyush talked about? The ESG goals that have been set out by different corporations. How are you realigning your priorities in light of this?
Shereen, right from inception, we always wanted to build a good company, a company that provides outstanding service to our customers, look after the employees who provide that service, make a profit. You have to make a profit, otherwise you're not going to be in business for long. And then look after, donate to the communities you do business. So we've done that for 37 years. And as Piyush says, that's the number one way of building a good business, especially a long-term business. And if you're building a long-term business, which we're planning to do, long after I'm gone, the next 100 years, then you have to focus on all of those constituencies. May I just say on the side, and so culture is very important, Shereen, and you build a culture over time, takes a lot of time. And I'm, of course, biased, but I'm quite excited about our culture. A culture of treating well, treating people well, a culture that follows the golden rule. Treat your neighbor like you want to be treated yourself. For your customers, your employees, your community, all over the place, of course, your shareholders. May I just go on a side in terms of public-private partnerships? We have the Bangalore International Airport. We own 54% of it. And I must tell you, it's an amazing success story. The second terminal will be opening in October. And I'd wager, with the exception of Singapore, that there is no airport, this terminal that's being opened. There's no terminal like the second terminal that's being built. Private enterprise at its best, with partnership with the government of India and the local Karnataka government. And it's just an amazing story, and you'll see it when it opens in October in front of you. I've seen airports all over North America and many parts of the world, and I haven't seen one like this. I had a tour about a month ago.
has a low bar, Prem.
Well, yes, Piyush, you were saying?
I just pulling Prem's leg. I said America has a very low bar.
But, Shobana, since we're talking about culture, and both Piyush and Prem alluded to that, the culture of collaboration, the culture of innovation, I have to say, I'm not a big fan of Jugaad. Yes, it teaches you to be resilient and adapt to the situation as it arises, but I think we need to build on a culture of excellence as well. So in that context, Shobana, I want to understand from you, especially when we talk about taking Indian brands global, let's be very honest, we're still very, very small percentage of global trade as of today. So what needs to happen, what needs to change, what needs to be prioritized to ensure that we get a larger share of global trade?
One is that the opportunity. So we did miss the 80s and the 90s when manufacturing took off in China. India and China almost had the same GDP, and I think that the country was encouraged to open. We missed some of the global, the medical tourism, because Thailand just did it. Now I think that the real opportunity here is there for countries like India, because one is that people are understanding that there's a huge that there's a huge pool of engineers, and I think that the world needs a lot of engineering talent at this time in many sectors. So we're seeing a resurgence of that coming in. We're seeing a resurgence of manufacturing, and this is not your same vanilla manufacturing that has come to the table here. We have, even if you look at some of the entrepreneurs that have set up world-class plants like the Reliance plant, it can take any crude in the world. If you talk about what Prem said, world-class airports, not just in Bangalore, but in almost every city. So if you look at manufacturing of auto components, here we're making a mark again, both for export and for our internal demand. And I think that each one of these sectors, that what we've learned from missing the bus at that time was that quality was super important. And I think Indians didn't hesitate to go out and forge some critical partnerships when it was required, whether it's with the Japanese, with the Koreans. And if you look at the way that 5G is coming, we have the cheapest data in the world, the cheapest, but the best networks. And I think all this will bring to bear that in a situation that, of course, in India, it's still tough to do business. It's still tough to bring scale. But when you see that the opportunity that you need an alternative, I think that India is truly an alternate country. And using that opportunity, we will have a chip manufacturing, we will have greater scale. And we're seeing that, whether it's the PLI, whether it's the government's thrust to make sure that, we make in India, for the world. I think everyone is starting to talk the same language. And when we do so, it's not just services, but it's definitely manufacturing. That if you ask me at any time whether there was the opportunity that's right, I would say in the 75th year, this is one of the things that I would be most hopeful about, that we can really be very, very vital to the world.
Well, we hope that we will be very, very vital to the world. But Piyush, that's exactly what I want to raise with you. You talked about the opportunity as well as the challenge of the geopolitical tensions that we're currently seeing in different parts of the world. At the same time, there's also the rise of nationalism. You talked about digitization and its advantages in the hope that we're in a boundary-less world, but we're not really, as we see more and more governments and policies taking a much more insular and an inward approach. So as a leader today, as a CEO, how challenging is it for you to navigate a world where you have geopolitical tensions as well as the rise of nationalism at the same time?
Well, I wouldn't deny it is a trickier world. But Shireen, I'm a bit of a contrarian. First of all, I don't subscribe to the theory of deglobalization. I think some of the fundamentals, information flows, data flows, technology flows, are just too far gone to reverse. Frankly, even between China and the US, I say it's not just a two-way reliance. It's actually a fused world. It's just very, very hard to unbundle today. And so while, yes, people are circling the wagons, it's not clear to me this is going to be a long-term trend. In a very strange way, I actually think the pandemic, the last 2 years, is going to accelerate globalization, not deglobalization, in a very important way. And that is just globalization of talent. People have figured that it's okay to work from anywhere. And the minute you say you can work from anywhere, then you could be working from Baltimore or Bangalore, it doesn't matter. I think that fact that work can happen anywhere and work can move smoothly, I think that's going to precipitate even more globalization in times to come. So I think we're just going through a short cycle. Over time, it will reverse. Now, in that context, I think India does have a couple of important things going for the country. Number one is we built a reputation as a technology powerhouse. Like I said before, it's the Infosys and HCS and TCS. It's the services sector more than product. But nevertheless, we're known for technology. And in a digitizing world, in a world of AI, in a world of blockchain, solutions that come from India will get a credibility. So I think that's something that we can leverage on as we look at expanding outside our borders. The other plus point we have is something Shobana said, our price point. Today we're still very, very competitive. The 2 rupee toothpaste or the low value item, which is really relevant for large parts of the world, not just the South, but increasingly even the North. People are looking at cutting back consumption patterns or looking for this thing. India is very well positioned for that. Building global brands is not easy. It's not going to happen overnight. Even the Chinese, frankly, even the Japanese and Koreans took 20, 30 years to get there. Nevertheless, I do think that those two pillars are pillars on the back of which we can build.
Prem, Warren Buffett clearly one of the icons that you have shaped and modeled your career on. As you look at CEOs of Indian origin today who are heading global corporations, anyone in particular that stands up?
Well, Shereen, I got to tell you, the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, MasterCard, Ajay Banga, Adobe, Shantanu, Narayen, and myself, we had one commonality. We all went to the same school, Hyderabad Public School in India, in Hyderabad. And my dad, who's long passed away now, but my dad was the principal of that school. He was vice principal and he was a teacher. And he ended his career by being the principal of that school. So I have a bias to those CEOs.
Well, Shobana, your playbook and what are you going to be changing, if anything at all, and who do you look up to at this point in time of the global CEOs that we've been talking about?
Definitely the ones that Prem spoke about, because I kind of know them, and my husband went to HBS, so and I live here, so I think that's a great, what Satya has done definitely has really reinvigorated a company that most people thought had reached its pinnacle. And I think that kind of difference, that when you can do that to mature companies, really shows great vision and foresight. And that's something that people like Prem and Ajay, who I serve on the Edison Alliance board with, I've seen that in many of the CEOs, and I've seen that in my dad. So if you ask me, who I admire, definitely all of them. My own playbook, I think that really comes from something that we learned during, that got reinforced during COVID, was that it's really about the trust that people have in you. And if you can, we need to keep that trust requires great sacrifice and doing things right. But when you make it happen, I really think that that's when the real good of not just humanity, but a healthcare enterprise really comes through. So that's something that we all are super doubling down on. That it's the value system and the trust that we've been able to keep and earn during the toughest of times.
Piyush Gupta, your playbook, leadership playbook, and what do you miss the most? Of not being in India? Cricket, Bollywood, what is it that you miss the most?
Actually, they often say Singapore is the best country, best city in India. So you don't wind up missing too much. We get more Indian theatre, Indian Bollywood, and Indian cricket than you probably get in most cities in India. Obviously, you miss, the energy level of the country. And that's obviously, in terms of playbook, I have to say that I think we're at a really important point in human history. I think technology is going to be a game changer. It already has been. If you look at the last 15 years, the mobile phone, the internet, Web 2, social media, etc. But I don't think we've seen anything yet. The power of AI, artificial general intelligence, and the power of blockchain technologies to reshape the back office of the world, the institutions and infrastructure we know, that's on us. And frankly, when you layer that on with graphics and 5G or virtual realities and metaverse, I think things are going to be very different in 10 years. And so you have to cater and make sure that you're adapting for a new world. The fundamentals don't change. I'm in the same camp as the other panelists. Culture is important. That obviously beats eat strategy for breakfast, as Drucker said. I think value systems are important. But how you manage a company is different. You can't manage it in the old way. Weber's hierarchy and the middle management and layers. You can't be nimble and adaptive if you continue to manage the company that way. You got to manage horizontally. You got to manage in a very different way.
Watsa, you wanted to get in the final word before we close.
Well, I think, Shereen, congratulations on having such a nice program with Piyush and Shobana, and I'm very happy to join you. And I think if I can end by saying that India, the next 10 years are going to be dramatic. It is the best place to invest. All of your audience and the people abroad, it's a wonderful country to invest, tremendous talent, all the things that we talked about. And I, for one, are very excited.